best.
At age 17, she began her career as a Marion Morgan dancer. On March 13th, 1981, one of the neighbors noticed Enid's...
And this lady was hurt to the point where she died. Okay.
I didn't do that.
All right.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel here. It's Lavender here, and today I decided to do a new true crime case because I'm in the mood to do true crime. So let's get started into this true crime case. So today I'm going to be covering the murder of Enid Whittlesey. I decided to do this case because not that many people have ever heard or know about this murder or true crime case, since it's more of like a vintage true crime case, since it took place almost in the 70s, but it took place in like 1981, so yeah. It is also one of my favorite Forensic Files episodes when it comes to murder true crime cases, and I wanted to cover it, so yeah. Since I haven't seen anyone cover it really, so yeah. So this case, again, was featured in media and on TV. It was in an episode of Forensic Files, the Forensic Files episode Sleight of the Hand. This is a case that took 16 years to solve after the murder, until DNA profiling and new fingerprint technology helped identify the killer years later. So on to the story of this true crime case. So here we go. On to the murder of Enid Whittlesey's story. So, in 1981, Enid Whittlesey, an 86-year-old woman, was repeatedly stabbed in her home on Cameron Street home, and her house was ransacked and robbed where she had lived for 40 years. Here's a little background on the victim, Enid Whittlesey. Enid was the oldest daughter of a successful railroad architect and engineer in the 1800s. He built train stations in the United States. More well known is in Albuquerque and in the Grand Canyon in 1902 and more. She was a free spirit and loved her dad's free spirit. She didn't want to go to college. She decided to become a dancer. And she was also a singer, and she never married. She retired in the 1950s, and she never owned a car. I don't think she learned how to drive, if I'm correct, and she just rode her bicycle, and she loved children in the neighborhood. Even in her 80s, she continued to ride her bicycle everywhere, so yeah. She was called the bicycle lady in her neighborhood and was loved by all the neighbors in the neighborhood. As she grew older and became like elderly, she was concerned about her safety in her house, since there was a lot of break-ins happening in the news and stuff, and she was afraid of someone breaking into her house and harming her. So she'd put like a anti-crime mechanism. She like did a DIY, and she tried to make it herself and stuff, so if someone were to try to break into her house or come through the door, she would hear it. And later, a neighbor noticed that her door was left open inside there, and her house was blood everywhere. There's blood all over the place, all over the walls, on the floor, up the stairs, leading all the way to her bedroom, where she was found murdered. The motive was clearly robbery, as the house had been completely ransacked, and the suspect had left plenty of evidence, and his type of blood was type B blood, and he was a lefty, as in his hands he was left-handed. However, this was back in 1981. The science technology wasn't that great at the time. That's why you see all the cases from like the early 1980s to the 70s, 60s, anything below that, not really being solved, because science was not advanced back then, so yeah. To solve this case and running the files was impossible at that time period, and the case went cold very fast due to the lack of technology. Later on in the 90s, detectives decided to run the fingerprints on a computer fingerprint identification machine that revolutionized technology through science fingerprinting DNA. And they ran through a comparison of the bloody partial handprint they recovered from the crime scene at Enid Whittlesey's crime scene. The bloody handprint and the fingerprints led to the arrest of Carl Franklin Stewart in the 1981 slaying of Enid, a man that had just been released from jail for domestic violence and had a history of hating elderly people.